So in conclusion, thank you everyone for deciding to do media over quick over TCP. And we'll be shipping that immediately. Oh, I see some folks just coming in from lunch. We'll hold that consensus for just one more second. We are now the MOT working group. We'll fall back to quick. Media over TCP. Okay, the last person to enter the room is the scribe. Okay, so what was there? I think Matt was going to back us up for about an hour and a half scribe-wise, but we do need that afternoon primary scribe. Does anybody feel like they... What's that? Oh, Luca's the backup. What should I do?
Tell Will it's him.
Will Law. Oh no, Will already scribed for us. We can't pick on him. He did backup yesterday. That was a wise call.
You get to pick the next scribe then.
Hey, Jordy, do you think you could help us out with some scribing for a bit? Okay. I will. While you were out, I did honestly just share with people that I'm not good at typing, so I don't usually volunteer to scribe. So if you feel like it'll be a big challenge, I think it's okay to pass the torch. But and Luke is going to help, probably. Okay, we're otherwise ready to go.
Yeah, I guess.
You want me to go over the agenda for the afternoon? Or? Okay. All right, folks. So Ted and I met. Yes. There is a new meetup link. If you have not refreshed the agenda, I goofed it up. Refresh the agenda. You'll both get our revised proposed agenda. That is not it. And you will get the new Medeco link because I had a copy-paste problem. Okay. So we're almost done with our big interim. So thanks everybody for hanging in there. Just a couple more hours. So the first thing we thought we'd talk about is the readiness for a call for adoption on the requirements draft. I'm not sure if, Spencer, you were ready for us to say that. If you want to say any words about it, Ted and I feel like this is in our charter. This is a document that seems to be trending in the right direction. It's the right starting point for us. We'll obviously continue to iterate on it as a working group. And the actual adoption call would be on the list. But if anybody wants to say anything about the requirements draft, and I see Martin Duke. You have to sing.
Better? Yeah, like I'm completely confounded by this microphone. Is the intent for this to be an actual RFC someday, or is this an internal working group product, or have we decided yet?
I'm not sure I know the answer. Ted, do you know the answer?
It's in our charter to produce, so it may eventually be an RFC, but not necessarily for a long time. So we adopt it, and we keep working on it as we go. We can always make the decision to drop the milestone later.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. I'm a little, for reasons that they're nothing to do with working group. I'm not a huge fan of like requirements RFCs, but I can live with that fudge for now.
Well, what we find is useful is having it open to work with, and at the end of the day, we figure out whether it was something that we need to put into the record or not. But it's definitely useful to have a set of editors such as James and Spencer continuing to keep us honest by tracking the use cases and requirements as we go, and having it be a working group document makes it clear to the rest of the IETF what status we think it has. That's why.
Yeah, I'm totally comfortable with that answer. On an unrelated note, I messaged Spencer about this privately, and he seemed amenable to it. But one thing that's not in this document is a discussion of use cases that are going to specifically benefit from Quick versus not. And to put my cards on the table, like yesterday was a fair amount of discussion about Using datagram and like sort of taking video over UDP and just putting over datagram and sort of bypassing the transport stuff in Quick. I have my own feelings whether that's like a useful thing to do or not, but I don't know if we want the requirements document to, which does not say we can't adopt this, but I don't know if like it would be, I don't know if other people think it would be useful for this document to try to address that and look specifically at use cases where we expect Quick provides some specific benefit.
So we can definitely address that in this document, but let's be cautious here. We don't want to use the requirements document to make the protocol decisions that belong in the protocol draft. And so I think what we would do here is say, this particular use case seems to require the following bits of quick level protocol mechanism, but that doesn't determine that those be the only protocol mechanisms that are used by the eventual MOQ overall architecture, right? So you could say this particular bit of a use case requires, let's say, going over 443 UDP, which is, let's face it, one of the things they require. But that doesn't tell you anything that says you couldn't use this over a different port in certain circumstances or something like that. So we can definitely lay them out in use cases and requirements here, but the protocol decisions won't get made in here.
No, yeah, I'm not arguing that we have to like say thou shalt not use datagram or whatever in this requirements document. I'm wondering if we should filter these use cases through we think that the Quick protocol can provide actually substantive advantages over the over the current like industry solution for this, or we should just kind of, because right now I feel like we're kind of documenting all the ways we use media on the internet and saying we could put all these over Quick, which is technically true. Do we want to constrain those use cases using that filter?
So I think maybe we should have this discussion in an issue on the document, because
No
I think there are some elements of what you're talking about in terms of constrain that maybe I don't agree with, but it would be better to have issue discussion and maybe some PRs, and then we can go from there.
Will do.
Okay. Spencer, you're up.
You're also muted.
Yeah. My apologies for answering the previous question. I thought Alan was asking me a question, and then I just kept answering questions. James is also on the call, so I cannot possibly speak for him. I think that one more revision of this thing would be useful. And if the working group is okay continuing to work on it, I guess one question that I'd ask is, do we need to do an update before looking at the issues, especially the issues we talked about this week? Do we need to spin a new revision before it's adopted?
I think it would be good to incorporate some of the discussion we've had here. I thought the discussion before lunch about the sort of the natures of relays and would adding some of that discussion and some of the other issues that you had. So I think go ahead and make one more, make the edits you need based on what we've learned this week, and publish a new version, and that would be what we would issue an adoption call on. James,
Cool.
do you want? Oh, I just wanted if you wanted to say anything about it.
No, that was kind of the thinking that I had, that we would make a stab. Well, one thing that would be really clear is as well is that the document has, until now really just touched use cases. Like, it would be good to get a feel from chairs and or working group what would be enough for adoption. Is there anything that should or shouldn't be in the document that would help steer that consensus call for adoption?
I don't have anything right now, but I will also open to the floor if there's anybody from the working group who, is there something in the document or is not in the document that is blocking, or someone's in the queue? Suhas.
having worked with having worked with James and Spencer in the last couple of weeks, I think the document is heading in the right direction, and if we can bring in some of the issue discussions that what we had in another revision, I think we were pretty close for adoption.
Okay. I think that's good. I realized we were supposed to be agenda bashing, and then I stopped. Now we can bash the rest of the agenda. But thank you, James and Spencer, for your work on this document, and we look forward to the next revision. And thanks, working group, for your participation. Okay, so for what we're going to do the rest of the day, we have the warp draft. We asked folks in advance to tag issues there that they thought were architectural. Looking at that repo, there's as of lunch, there were 9 such issues. And we're sort of under the assumption that it would still be useful to spend working group time here to discuss them, get input, see if we can close them. I think the overarching goal is still where we came in, which is that we can, the authors of this document, based on feedback here, can evolve it to a place that it could also be adopted as, the starting point for a base protocol. I guess at some point, so that's what we were going to do for the next couple hours with a break. And then we also talked about if there are particularly thorny issues, and it seems like we found a few, that we would form perhaps some small design teams or assignees to these particular thorny issues to kind of come up with a proposal that we could discuss at our virtual interim that we are planning to have now between now and Yokohama. And then we would spend some time wrapping up, and then we would all go drink beer. So what do people think about this agenda? Suhas, you're still in queue, I think. Hearing no objections. Okay, this is going to be easier if I pull it onto my locals because I can't see up there very well. So if you're going to run the issues list, why don't we trade mics? You take that one. Oh, I didn't even see that.
Run the queue.
Okay. Okay. I'm tempted to go. What do you think? Should we do oldest to newest, newest to oldest? Oldest, starting with the oldest. Because okay, yes, got it.
Yeah, I'm saying oldest to newest because and the old ones we may go, this is OBE by later things. We can just move past it.
You can also rank by discussion length because that's a proxy for interest in the particular issue.
For the really new ones, there hasn't been any, so I think.
Okay, so first we have 54. Add text to talk about relays and pub sub. And I'm not signed in on this computer, but I'll see if I can fix that. Suhas, do you want to talk about this issue?
Yep. Today we have a placeholder text that talks about relays. This document, since relays are considered as the first class elements in the architecture, we need to have some text that talks about how relays participate in the protocol. We don't have to talk about how relays networks are implemented, on what do they do internally, but at least what's the response to the protocol. We need to have something about data.
Okay, I have not read this PR, or at least if I have it, may have gone past. And everything else I read in the last week. Does anybody who has read this PR want to? I did read this because I said don't merge it until we talk about it. It seems like there has been some discussion. People who have discussed on this would like to highlight things that they think are controversial about it, or that how can we help drive this issue to closure with this group here? Not seeing very much. Let me ask a slightly different question, which is, at least the way I think about the warp. Oh, there is someone in queue. Spencer.
Yeah, and thank you for asking the question the way you did. I'm sorry, I was a little bit slow clicking on things. Um, the one question I have is, it seemed like there were some things that we talked about today that were going to be very warp specific, and that there were things that we've talked about that might not be as tied to a particular protocol or protocol implementation. I'm assuming that the definitions I'm writing in the requirements draft would be pretty high level, and that there's going to be plenty of work to do at the warp level. That does seem to me like that's something that I'll need to coordinate with whoever is still holding the pen on the warp draft. Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense.
So we'll do the right thing. I just wanted to say it.
Let me ask us maybe a slightly different question. I mean, I think there's going to be lots of hard conversations and decisions we have to make. I'm sort of hoping we can make most of them after a document is adopted in the working group, rather than making the document authors sort it all out. If there are things about this PR or about this issue that are super controversial, are people okay with that being sort of punted until after adoption so that the working group can hammer it out with a more formal process? Or would they prefer that when we make a call for adoption that we have addressed this issue at least to some degree?
Suhas and Luke are both in queue.
Since I wrote the PR, I would basically say the base protocol for MOQ should have relays in it before adoption. That would be my stand on that.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything controversial. Like, we're going to need to write how relays work. They're just like bike shedding over how to do it, but we can always figure that out later.
Okay. Ted, I know we have blocked time to sort of do assignments at the end, but do we want to assign people? Well, this one already has a PR, so maybe there's already someone who's driving this particular PR.
Okay, so I think the later assignments are for kind of gnarlier, bigger questions, but for this, it would be great if we can tag somebody with this. Suhas, are you okay with we tag you?
It's look at that. It's already assigned to Suhas.
All right, so
Victory.
success.
Yes. Okay. Slice as segment. I am not sure who this is. Why? I mean, if I want to comment, I do, but right now I'm. Oh, if I'm going to assign, yes, I guess I will. All right. Well, this one's here. Hold on. I'll figure. I will do that, and then. First of all, I'm not sure who if ZM Gorinich is, or if they're here, or if somebody else has context on this issue.
I have a little bit of context. So right now, we kind of make the claim that objects are frame scoped. You can't have anything smaller than a frame. But especially for real-time conferencing, you want to deliver slices, which are part of a frame, because they can have their own dependencies and their own, especially IDRs. It's really common, instead of having one giant iframe, you split it up over the course of multiple frames by having a part of an iframe over multiple frames.
Look, I think you would have to be a bit more specific there, is whether this slicing, you want it to be done at the relay or you want it to be done at the publisher. Because in the model, we do not say that an object is a frame.
There's an assumption that it's a frame, but you're right. I think the object right now, I think it's an assumption.
Because, I mean, technically, yes, I mean, we could have, I mean, we do that, for example, when we're sending data columns, we're sending fraction of frames, fraction of objects. But it's...
I think it really gets down to, like, for example, the group object model. You can't really. Maybe you can. I don't know. I have to think more about it. But we just have to, like, explicitly almost make a requirement that slices are a unit of data.
Yeah, but basically, the way I would resolve what you say is that we are sending objects. And when a relay receives an object, it forwards the object. It may forward it as a series of chunks, but it's nobody's business to tell the relay how it chunks the object. If the publisher wants the object to be chunked in a specific way, then it should actually have done that by having several chunks in the data.
Yeah, I don't think this would be hard to support. I just think we need to make sure that it's a requirement and we design around it.
Okay, Mo is in queue.
Yeah, I think this issue actually confuses several different issues. GDR, I think, is really independent of slicing, and slicing in general is really independent of whether or not you need to be able to represent the objects one way or the other. I think the real requirement here, the real issue here, is the protocol should not encode lengths of large things, because those large things may not be known at this time. That's what impacts latency. That's what prevents the ability to achieve ultra low latencies. So if you want to support ultra low latency, you want to avoid having lengths up front in object headers, because you don't know the length of this object. Even if you're not slicing, even if you're doing an entire video frame is one slice, even when you're doing that, you still want to be able to emit the first packet of the iframe out immediately, not wait for the entire iframe to be encoded before you speed up the packet. So even without slices, there's still a requirement for low latency to not pre-append in headers links. That's, I think, the core requirement for the protocol. Whether or not you have slices in objects or sub-objects or something like that, I think that's an independent issue. And whether or not you're doing gradual decoder refreshes is yet another independent issue.
Okay, thanks, Mo. If you feel like this issue, if you feel like it should be a separate issue, can you just go ahead and file that, please? And at least my most recent reading of the draft, I want to say the way objects were communicated was without a length because they're unterminated. I don't want to skip the queue. Is it answering that question short, Victor?
There is actually a bit of contradiction in drafts. The mechanism currently does require length. However, there is a tax that requires you to send objects as soon as you have at least beginning of the object.
Oh, maybe I saw something where you set it to 0 when it's unknown. Okay, Luke is nodding.
I did that recently because the plan was never to have that length for this reason, but I noticed it was added so quickly at a text it can be 0.
Okay, seems like most people.
We should fix that though.
Okay, yeah, with not sending links. Thanks, Mo, for raising that. Suhas, I think you're next.
I think this goes back to the question that we need to leave the application to divide the way they want to divide, and we should not specify in the protocol how that should be done. We should just help them to provide things to mark on the payload that says what it is, so the end applications can understand.
Okay, thanks. Will?
Yeah, I think my question was just answered by Luke. It was the equivalent of chunk transfer. If I don't know the length, and I don't want to wait till the end of the object before I give it to the next hop on the node. So I want to be progressively transferring, and what slices I use to progressively or incrementally transfer it is up to the two node, up to the sending node.
I will just note that the one place where you do need lengths is if you want to be able to drop something, right? You want to drop something in the middle. You got to know how big it is, so you know what to skip over. And I think it also raises a question about someone else brought up just a second ago that relays can maybe break things apart. Can relays also stick things together, or are those decisions the encoder makes them and the relays just follow, or is that something that we need to decide on? Roberto's in queue.
Sorry, Alan, but can I just finish my question?
Oh,
then,
I'm sorry.
Based on what you said, because now, given how Warp's working, I'm sending a GOP per stream, right? But I won't know the length of it before it starts, and it'll go up, and so every single object I'm transmitting, I'm not going to know the length for, and which contradicts what you just stated about we need to know the length if we can drop.
My reading of the draft is that because of that, you can only drop the tail of that of what's in that stream.
And that's why you make a stream per object, so you can drop the end of the object.
I think the clarification there for Will is that it's one object per GOP. In the current thing, it's not per video frame.
I think if you wanted to control it, you could use the group syntax we discussed earlier, where group would be the larger object, and then your objects, the level below, would be application-defined, droppable, independently droppable units, because they would have explicit names.
Okay, this more queue. Roberto, Kirill, and Rajiv.
Yeah, Will started getting to what I was about to say, which is awesome. This all depends on the unit of addressing. If the unit of addressing is contiguous over some space, and there is no side channel that says where you can go to the next thing, then we're stuck. If we do have a side channel, however, which could be an optional side channel, which was a discussion earlier, then you can skip, even if it's a contiguous object and it has a hole in the middle. So it really depends on what addressing we are adding, even if we don't change this.
Okay, thanks. Kirill.
I just want to clarify that we're on the same page, that when we say there is no length for the object, so that implies that this minimal thing that we're going to be sending is going to be mapped to a stream.
Can you speak up just a little bit?
Mapped to a quick stream. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to know where the boundaries of the objects at the very least.
Like, yeah, and an object with no length right now, if length is 0, goes until the end of a stream. You could specify a length of a message, but if you don't, it's just until EOF.
Right.
Okay, I think that makes sense. You do have to know where some point you got to know when it ends. There's got to be a terminator. Okay, Rajiv.
Yeah, so this is back to your question about intermediaries that are recompositing, the session. So here, I can actually think of scenarios where they are controlled or receive hints from the upstream encoder or upstream republisher who's publishing the MOQ stream about how they are allowed to potentially recomposite it for forward delivery. I'm also thinking of scenarios where they may be receiving hinting from entirely third-party systems, like, for example, a network management system that's giving this relay visibility into real-time spectrum utilization, and that can be used to, choose whether or not to advertise certain bit rates onto a network that's starting to become congested. Okay, so I'd ideally like to have that flexibility retained so that intermediary relays can potentially do these kind of recompositing actions.
Okay, thanks. Who is next? Suhas.
I think we are trying to have a solution from the requirement, which is saying that if I don't want to include length, then send it as a stream. That's a solution, how to implement, but that's not a requirement.
Sorry, it needs to have a terminator.
Right, like,
a better way to phrase it.
The other way to implement is that in the same stream, I can have an offset and a fin bit that basically says, how it relates to the original object. I think we should not go from the solution to the requirement, but rather work from requirement to multiple ways you can implement it.
I think I'm. Oh, okay. So we've talked this for a little bit. Do someone would like to own this issue and drive to completion? Well, you want to take it? Okay, thanks. So that's Suhas. Boom. Did that actually do it? Looks like it did it. Boom. All right, progress. I guess the other question is, this is market architectural, do we feel like we need to, sounds like this is one we need to get a resolution for to move forward. Oh, oops, I don't want to do that. Okay. Marking references. Does anybody else have context on this one? Do we need to make this a little bigger so you can read it?
Since I responded, I trying to remember what it was. It
looks like it's about the dependency graph, which has come up a couple times.
Yeah.
So because of this issue, I actually removed the dependency graph because one of the concerns is it's too complicated. One of the suggestions here is doing kind of what like now yous do, is adding bits to specify like a little hint, like is it independently decodable or not, but not the full graph. And just to punt, I just removed anything about dependencies from the draft right now until we properly talk about it.
Christian.
To support what Luke is saying there, we have some kind of a not complete understanding of the problem there. There is a belief that as long as you have a partial ordering of the frames, you can find some kind of a expression of a subordering in a simple way. But that has to be filled out, and I think that we should take that as an action to express some kind of ordering in a way that is simple to implement and also as much as possible media independent.
You say media independent?
Yes.
Okay. Ted wants to know if you're volunteering.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Mel, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this working group should solve this because we also have the frame marking extension that was done in AVT, and we also have another organization in AOM. There was a AV1 dependency descriptor, which was supposed to be somewhat codec agnostic, or at least reusable for other codecs that are similar to AV1. So I would look at those as starting points and not try to define this ourselves in this working group.
Suhas?
I agree and disagree with Mo in the sense that yes, we need to learn from what we did in the frame marking and in the dependency descriptor. At the same time, I would also want to encourage us to think how can we do it media independent. That way, even if AV2 comes or AVX comes tomorrow, we don't have to teach relays something new that has happened.
I will just say, speaking as an individual, that and I'm not a video expert, but it seems like this is expressing a full dependency graph is complicated, and as it sounds like maybe other people have some ideas how to do it, and maybe it's not. The question is, why would we include it in the protocol? Would mostly be, I assume, for relays to make better decisions about what to drop or forward or prioritize. So I guess just keeping that in mind, and maybe it does not. Maybe we can make a simplest. Maybe we can simplify what we're sending.
Yeah,
to achieve that goal.
And if you assign me to the issue, the way I would try to resolve it is try to find the simplest possible way we can say that the relay can act and it makes sense. Mm-hmm. And that is not managing a full dependency graph. I mean that has been tried actually in the early attempts at priorities for HTTP3, and we know that if you go that path, you end up going back.
Who's next? Victor.
I think the question here is not just how we specify our references, but whether we should make it a mandatory part of the base draft, because it is unclear to me outside of knowing where the iframes are, how much benefit you get from knowing more details about references versus the complexity trade-off.
Okay, let me see. Do you? I need both hands to see it. You're in this repo, right, Christian?
So please track the issue so that you can look at what Christian proposes and make sure that it meets your needs, okay?
Oh, I guess the other question I did want to ask about it is, are we okay with a simplistic?
Can you just add a comment to it that says assigned Christian, since he's not there? And
yeah, don't leave, or we will assign issues to you. Do we feel like we need to have this issue resolved before we could adopt this as a draft? Go ahead, Suhas.
I I think this goes to a meta issue of what relays should be should be made aware of to act on it. References is one aspect of it. I think if you can basically agree on, relays should not be exposed to certain things, I think that kind of seals the thing, saying that we need to just define what are the things that needs to be exposed to the relays, and that can cover the case for, and we can develop on it.
Yeah. So let me rephrase, Alan, in a slightly blunter way. Who will go home crying if this isn't in the draft on adoption as opposed to on publication? And if the answer is no, because we know the metadata is, the meta issue is being worked, then it's not a blocker for adoption. Okay?
That's exactly what I'm trying to get at, right? This is we know we have lots of work to do. I want to make sure that we don't make 4 people do it, and then and we have nothing to do until they're done. Okay. Catalog track definition insufficient to communicate client selection criteria. Will, do you want to talk about this? Or maybe we did a little bit yesterday.
Yeah, it actually came up yesterday, and I think the overall idea here is that we're using the init object or the init payload of a CMAF header to describe the items. And it is indeed true that the items I list there most of them can be described within CMAF. Maybe not hand signing, something like that. But my bigger concern is the extensibility of this, that by saying that this is where we communicate the selection criteria, those selection criteria have to be inside a CMAF standard, which is MPEG, which is not this group. And if we want to extend that in the future, for example, a VR world where I might have very different selection criteria for choosing my tracks, we have to then go and create boxes of our own or go to MPEG and ask them to start adding it to CMAF, which is a long way around. So while it certainly works as described, I feel its extensibility is challenged, and that we might look at alternate ways to specify the selection criteria.
So I'm just going to comment. There is a registry for this is the manifest format, I'm just going to call it, from going on. CMAF is the only entry right now, but either we can specify something or an extension to replace this with whatever JSON encoded thing we want or anything. So we're not bound to CMAF at all. It just happens to be the default registry right now.
Okay, I'd buy that, but then we need to have some sort of a field for how are we defining it? The registry, as you point out, that's maintained by this group. And then we have to have alternate mechanisms that we might want for conveying the info. I do like the conciseness and compactness of the init container, but I can see quickly how we're going to run out of runway on that.
Victor?
So the fundamental thing here is that, well, when you put media, you have to have some container and you have to have some format for describing all of the metadata adjacent to it. And the question is, who defines and controls this format? And the reason the draft currently specifies CMAF is that it seemed to be the most agreeable thing that would not burden this group with supporting every possible codec and use case for perpetuity, the same way RTP does with the codecs. RTP does, and the same way MPEG does, and the same way anyone who maintains a container format does. I can see that this will probably not work out in long term. In terms of those limitations, but the question to some extent is, do we want to take on the onerous task of defining more and more metadata, or do we want to defer it to some other group? So I understand that from many perspective, IETM seems to be more plausible venues than ISO, but this is part of the choice that is being made here, at least that is being suggested here. And as Luke mentioned, CMAF is technically only format that is specified, but you can change it.
Okay, I see the queue has populated quickly, so please, brevity is the soul of wit. Suhas, show us how it's done.
Yeah, the one thing I proposed on the chat list yesterday is that the base document does not have to specify how an opaque catalog object is encoded or formatted, and companion document that says how that is done for CMAF. And some of us are working on a format that can be done for raw, and we don't want to put that in the base document either. We would like to have an extension mechanism. The base document can refer to that document and say, if you are supporting CMAF, this is the document you have to read. And if you are doing some XYZ, that's a document you have to read. And that has to be negotiated. And the charter says that whatever format you use has to be negotiated as well. So I think moving it away will kind of close this issue and forces us to think about shipping the payload of the catalog objects as an opaque objects.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
So the way Luke has this currently done is with the registry. Do you object to the use of registry for this?
No.
No. Okay. Thank you.
Rajiv.
Yeah, so my thought here is that this is effectively a new delivery standard, right? So as a part of its life cycle, there is going to be a significant amount of time where we're going to expect that this standard is coexisting with the existing delivery standards out there. And I think it's a worthwhile goal for us to make sure that we make it as easy as possible for someone who is running infrastructure that has to deliver both the traditional CMAF, HTTP, maybe even HTTP over quick style workflow side by side with a MOQ workflow. Okay, and maybe that may be us having some, like you said, a registry which allows me to just embed a lightly edited CMAF manifest as a part of my catalog entry. Okay, where I tweak the entries within the manifest to reference internal tracks inside my MOQ session or MOQ broadcast scope, rather than separate URLs and stuff like that. So that is something which I believe will have a lot of value, and it acts as a very easy on-ramp for someone who's already doing video and delivery at scale to start supporting MOQ with minimal disruption to their workflow. And as client support and endpoint support picks up and starts evolving, it's just a matter of the percentage of traffic going on MOQ keeps increasing without the need to massively re-engineer everything. And if we're talking about new containers, new codecs, then there's absolutely nothing to worry about, because you don't have a legacy infrastructure or legacy deployments to handhold through the process.
Okay, thanks. Kirill.
Kirill Pugin, Meta. So one thing is, I don't think the information that is available in CMAF is sufficient for clients to make a selection today. You could, in theory, have that information in CMAF. In practice, nobody does it today. And so to the Rajiv's point, we already produce dash segments, CMAF segments, right? So I would rather not to change that packaging, and if I want to deliver that over MOQ, so which does mean we do need to have some metadata that is not in the CMAF or not even container specific.
Okay. Mo?
I think CMAF makes a lot of sense for people who are already streaming static content, but for a lot of very dynamic things, especially for real time, it's a little bit awkward. Are you going to send 50 different catalogs for all the 50 different things you may offer in this one session? And can this track switch among any of those formats, or you have to literally create 50 tracks if you're going to offer those 50 different formats? So I think for dynamic cases, where you're in a video conference or you're receiving something that's not as simple as a static, encoded file, single audio track, single video track, static encoded file, preset resolutions and all of that. I think it starts to get a little confusing how to properly encode that in this kind of, simplistic catalog with init segments format. So it'd be useful to see what the proposal is for more dynamic things like a video conference or a VR session.
Okay, I think I heard several different opinions. I heard CMAF is great. I heard we need our own. I heard it'll be really hard. It needs to be. So who would like to take point on driving this? I feel like we need to make a little more progress on this.
Will, you originally raised it. Can we give you the assignment here?
Yes.
Excellent.
If I can add one point on the clarification is that I don't think I heard people totally against CMAF. I think it was more about should we include it in the base document or not. I think we should think from that angle as well.
Yeah, I mean, by base document, meaning not just when we adopt it, but when we publish it, is CMAF a required format, mandatory to implement format, or is it just one of the options, something along those lines? Okay. Will wins this prize. There we go. Victory.
By the way, the scribe can always interrupt to ask a scribe question like that, so feel free.
Okay. I think Will, this is also you. We talked, I think, a little bit about it yesterday, but maybe it's just good to kind of have a concise...
Well, these two are related. So I think what's important here is I would like us to architect something equivalent to what I'm going to call MOQ base protocol. It's a very generic, abstract way where we have an object model, we have a set of behaviors, and we convey data. And then we can publish that as an RFC. And if you're a relay builder, you just read that RFC and nothing else, okay? And you deploy it. Then we can create instantiations or use cases of it. Something very much like Warp, something very much like Quicker. These can all sit on top of that. And something very much like VR or all the people who are not exactly represented here today. But they can all operate independently. To do that, we can't keep mutating this catalog object and adding ever more fields. Every new case we come up or every implementation is going to want to innovate quickly. And we want to allow that innovation. Every week we want to add a new field. And it's really just a contract between the publisher and the subscriber. We don't need to go update all our relays to manage it. But if we keep it inside these discrete fields, then it's part of the base protocol. So what I was hoping to, and I think it's still consistent with what's being proposed for Warp, is the catalog becomes an identifier, a registry. We have a registry for, oh, I'm running Warp, and it's got an ID number 1. And then the catalog has an opaque container which holds a catalog relevant to that registered item. So in the case of Warp, it would be the catalog as we've got it here, binary packing with CMAF inits. If you're wanting to do Dash or HLS, it can be something looking like a playlist or a manifest. And if you want to have another format, you can just have JSON packed in there as base 64. But having an external document, I think, gives us an opaque payload gives us the flexibility to have a reliable protocol and then to innovate on top of it.
The queue is empty. That means everyone is ready to merge a PR once Will writes it.
So what's in the isn't that what's in the draft now? Like there's the MCAF is like an example, but essentially there's like an opaque identifier, then a big blob.
No, there isn't. If we can scroll to the... It's not, no, you'd have to go to the actual warp
draft. Into the draft?
Yeah. I mean, I think Luke knows it off by heart, but there's a if you scroll down to catalog, or on the right-hand side, there's an easy menu, table of contents.
No. Is there?
Yeah, there. Go down, down.
There it is.
There's catalog.
Bingo.
So right now, all it is a URI and a number of tracks, and then the registry, the container format, is telling you if it's CMAF or not, and then a blob.
So what I think we should do is it can have a broadcast URI, but then it should have a version and then an opaque payload, and that should be it for catalog. That opaque payload is the one that describes your tracks and what they look like and how they are, because how people advertise and describe tracks can be very different in other implementations. So I think there could just be the 3 items: the registry that you speak about to say, what am I doing? And the URI, which we agree on is this key identifier, and then the payload.
Yeah, then the relay wouldn't know about the track ID, and maybe it doesn't need to know it.
I agree, it doesn't need to know it, and that's important, because remember the base protocol, if I'm a relay builder, I just read the base protocol, and I don't have to understand track IDs. I just have to acknowledge them in a subscribe request and know how to read them from my object header, but I don't need to know what the URL's for and all the fancy combinations of how you might request them.
So let me ask a clarifying question. When you say opaque here, do you mean a structured set that is unknown to the reader, but is still a structured set with things inside it like track IDs, which are understood according to whatever the format is? Or are you referring to like an opaque identifier, which is some hash?
No, when I say opaque, what I mean is it's opaque at the base protocol level. It's just a binary payload. But then it's highly structured in terms of when your registry says that this is warp, then when you get that binary payload, you know how to unpack it. There's another document, and maybe it's one we write. It's the minimum version that says, okay, I know all the fields.
You answered my question, and I think the biggest question we're going to have past this, and this is why the chairs are looking for stuck keys for this, is how does this interact with what the relays need to know? And if the answer is anything that the relays need to know go above the opaque identifier, then every time we have something that we think the relays need to know, we need to be able to modify that format, which is within the control of this group. But anything that we don't think the relays need to know goes within that opaque identifier. There may be cases where the answer is both. It needs to go in both, and we'll have to deal with that. But I think I hear you, but I think that means that this needs to be very carefully worded around what opaque means, because it's not opaque to anybody but the relay. It's not opaque to the sender, and it's not opaque to the receiver.
That's correct. So let's deprecate opaque and come up with a better term.
Okay.
So it also may not be opaque to the relay. The relay may completely understand this. It's just
there's nothing stopping
a warp relay instead of a base protocol relay.
It may not act differently as a result of it. So I'm going to look at the person sitting next to you who is nodding up and down very, very actively during your conversation about this base issue. Can we assign this one to you, Roberto?
Oh, there's
there's
also Rajiv is in queue.
Okay, Rajiv's in queue, and then we'll look for an assignee.
Yeah, so I was basically looking at it from this perspective that if we follow down the path that Will is laying out, it makes it very clear that the relays understand the structure of all of this, okay? They do not necessarily need to have any visibility or understanding of the payload or how any internal structure of the payload may be there. And then we come back to my earlier point where we would have two different classes of intermediaries. The intermediaries that don't do anything with the payload. So these are intermediaries that would be the MOQ basic kind of proxies. They can do fan out, they can do caching, they can do everything else that is needed, but they're limited to doing all of this as per the set of advertisements from the publisher married with whatever subscriptions come from the client. Okay, they don't get to change any of those dynamics. But it's entirely possible to have a relay that chooses to implement understanding of whichever payload is being identified in the registry. In an example, we may take that as CMAF, and it can then, assuming it's allowed to do it, from an encryption perspective, take more, invasive actions on that stream.
Yeah.
Right. So, but the base relay should be capable of being implemented with zero understanding of the payload, other than the fact that here's a registry ID, this is what this payload means. And for each registry ID that gets defined, there's some basic rules on how you handle the track as a unit.
Okay, Luke?
Yeah, I was just going to quickly say, I don't think the relays need to know track ID right now. They don't need to know the number of tracks. So yeah, I think it's fine if we just broadcast a URI manifest. I think that's a resolution for now. But to Ted's point, if relays do need to know something, we're going to have to add stuff to this catalog message.
The subscribers subscribe by track ID, though, right?
The subscribers can parse the manifest, right?
And what is
the final endpoint.
But then a relay gets a track ID and
it just trusts whatever
and just
forwards that. It just forwards it, right? In theory, it doesn't need to know if it's a valid track ID.
Yeah, I guess that's what you're missing is the ability. If I say subscribe track ID, some completely invalid number. Then
if a relay wanted to, it could parse this message.
No, we're not. Relays should not parse
well,
this.
I agree wholeheartedly, but for anyone who wants to say my relay has to understand it because I want to do something smart, yeah, your relay can go read it. It's not encrypted. It can access it.
I mean,
I don't
could
think
be
it
encrypted.
should.
We could totally encrypt the manifest.
I agree with Luke on that one. Like, if relay really wants to do it, we need to add certain things, but it can be totally encrypted. If you don't want to leak information to the intermediaries, it needs to be encrypted.
Okay, Suhas, you kind of jumped the queue there because we have Victor
I'm sorry.
Ahead of you. Victor?
I just said feel free to assign it to me if you want.
Hey.
Okay.
That's a win. I just have one more clarifying question. Is there a world where you don't have to send a catalog at all, or it's transmitted out of band and the client or receiver just says subscribe this broadcast?
Currently, that's impossible because we need somehow to transmit init segments, and without an init segment, you cannot initialize decoder.
Yeah, no, we could totally send the catalog out of band. It could be part of the application, and if the init segment's in it.
I mean, because I think that Christian raised that point yesterday about sending too much. The catalog has both too much information and not enough. I think was sort of the way he put it. So it just seems like maybe a world in which you can live without it may also be valuable. And I probably jumped the queue, but I don't have a button in front of me. It looks like Spencer, then Roberto, then Kirill. And then maybe we should move on to another issue. Spencer.
Yeah, I just mentioning that we are kind of using the term relay to mean a whole bunch of things. And I apologize that we don't have a proposal we don't have a proposal yet, reflecting the discussion from earlier today about the different functions that we're talking about. Like I said, just keep that in mind as we're having the conversation. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Roberto.
When we talk about keeping things opaque, I think it's important to say why in the same breath, because we end up confusing ourselves sometimes. So I think one of the things I heard was we want to keep it opaque because then it's orthogonal and we have better scalability and adaptability. That's great. And then I heard other people saying that maybe we want to encrypt it or whatever, which can be done for the same reason as we've seen before, but also can be done because we care about privacy or authentication or security. Just want to say, like, please in the same breath, otherwise it's hard to know if we're solving the problem.
Okay, Kirill. I think you're going to get the last word, then we're going to move on.
Oh, yeah, Kirill Pugin, Meta. I just, to Alan's question, yeah, we should have cases, and I think there are cases where there's no catalog, like there's no manifest, there's no catalog, which is like, or it can be sent out of band. Similarly, how Dash or HLS work, right? So you don't have to fetch the manifest using manifest URL. You can get the manifest in line and just never ask for it anymore. So I think that should be fine. I don't think it should be a problem. And I do like the idea of like not specifying exactly what the manifest is and kind of leaving it out to consumers, so to speak. I think it makes it a little bit more extendable and easier to manage.
All right, thanks. I said queue's empty. We assigned our issue. All right, I think we're halfway there. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 to go. We've only been going for an hour since we started a little bit late, so I'm going to try to keep going unless people are desperate. All right, Suhas, and again, we probably spent most of the morning talking about this and a little bit on 69, but do you want to say more about data model and just kind of I know we wandered a little bit in the data model section. You want to wrap us up? Or?
Yep, I kind of want us to think of what different use cases that MOQ is envisioning to solve, and have data model that's basic enough to support all those use cases. The current data model is limited in certain cases. The PR69 was a proposal. It was not a rewrite. The only reason it was written as a separate section was because it was easy to reason about, instead of having a lot of diffs on the PR. So, but I would like us to encourage us to kind of think of different use cases, not for today's, but also some things that people are thinking about.
Luke.
So my feedback to this issue is it's trying to do a lot without specifying what the actual issues really are.
You're saying the issue or the PR?
The issue and the PR. So
okay.
In the PR, I kind of broke it down to like 9 separate things that could be their own issue and had their own implementation, and there's a debate there. So I would at least say, like, at least this issue should be broken into pieces, and the PR should be broken into pieces is my main feedback.
If you have a good sense of what the individual issues are that you would like resolved independently, can you file those issues?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, like globally unique broadcast URI, I filed because of this.
Okay.
The PR.
So some have worked that way. I know at least when I looked at the diagram that was in 69, I want to make sure I'm jumping. Yeah, I'm not jumping. Thank you. Compared to what is in the draft, it seemed like group was the one piece of hierarchy that was different. Is that a fairly consistent reading? Or
right. Group was one thing that was added mainly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
so like Victor has a PR that just pretty much adds group by itself as a piece.
Okay. Because my sense, based on the discussion this morning, also found like we seem to have consensus that group was a useful construct in the model.
Right, and the question of how you implement group, whether it's streams or group IDs, et cetera, is sort of orthogonal to that idea. We can assign more than one person, and I think Suhas and Luke are the natural people to assign here. Is that okay?
You guys feel good with that? Okay.
Sure.
All right. Do we feel like, since we did sort of reserve, some issues might be thorny, certainly based on this morning's discussion, it sounds like this one might be. Do we feel like we want to have sort of a full-on design team, or does that group of 3 seem like a good...
That seems like the right group of 3.
Okay.
It's going to be Suhas, Luke, and Victor.
Excellent. It's almost like you guys want to get out of here early or something.
Yeah, so this is a sub, as we just discussed, right? So I think...
do we want to should we just cover it? Because I think we spent some time talking uniqueness yesterday also, so you want to just cover a little bit about what we're talking about here?
Yeah, because I think this is controversial. But yeah, the question is, should the broadcast URI be unique within the scope of a connection, like a quick connection? Should it be unique within the scope of like a service, or should globally unique? How do you even enforce global uniqueness, et cetera? And why are we trying to do it?
You can assign me.
Okay. Because there are some folks in queue.
Okay.
Suhas, are you in from before, or are you in for this one?
For this one, I would like to be, because this came out of the PR69, so I would like to be involved in this one as well. And Ted coming on board is good as well.
Okay. I see Roberto, Will, and then Carol.
Roberto Payon, clarifying question on this one. Are we trying to define the question with this PR, or are we trying to define the solution?
This isn't a PR, so it is an issue. So
issue, sorry.
Maybe Luke, do you want to answer that? Do you know do we know what the question is, that whether or not broadcast URIs are globally unique or not answers?
I mean, the object model PR, the quick R one, it must be globally unique. and I filed this issue just to discuss it because you can't. Unfortunately, it was one sentence in a gigantic PR. So,
Gotcha. So an interpretation that would be valid then is it should be as unique as any other URL.
No, yeah, that would be my interpretation too.
Okay, I see Will, and then Kirill, and then Ted.
So yeah, my comment was exactly an answer to your question. I don't think it needs to be strictly globally unique like a GUID, but it should have the uniqueness of a URL where the host name is responsible for ensuring the remainder of the L is unique within that host space, that namespace. CNN.com/stream123. It's up to whoever owns CNN.com domain to guarantee that stream123 is not used anywhere else in the world, is only used to describe this piece of content. And I think that's reasonable. We have the same requirements. We also have a global registry of these domain names, which is scalable and we can access. And we have certificates to guarantee that you're talking to the person who actually owns CNN.com to figure out if it is a unique name. So that would be my suggestion, that URLs are sufficient and necessary for the broadcast ID URI.
All right, take us away, Ted.
Ted Hardy, moving startlingly quickly away from the chair slide because this is not definitely a chair opinion. But I will point out that many publishers here may be individuals who are participating in something like a video conference, and expecting them to have independent domain names is not necessarily going to be a success. So I think we have to think carefully, not move away from URI, but think about what schemes we're using with that URI and what the constraints are for situations where you have a publisher who does not control a domain namespace, because that will not be unusual in some of these use cases. This is why I said, yep, throw me in here, because it is not necessarily going to be the case that all of these people who have the capability of emitting media into one of these systems also control the domain for themselves.
They don't have to control it. They have to have permission to use it. When you use Zoom or WebEx or Teams today, if I do, I go in and Google assign me a Meet URL or WebEx assigns me one. That's what I use. They're responsible for assigning uniqueness.
So we're talking about what guarantees the identifier needs to have. And the question of who makes the guarantees is different in different parts of the system. So I think this needs a little bit more discussion. This is why I volunteered to work on it. But I think what you need to recognize is that if you're going to be able to build these up into various different things, the idea that the identifier is globally unique needs to have a duration. URNs would be forever. This may or may not need that. It needs to be something that anybody who needs this identifier can mint, and it needs to be comprehensible by the people who are consuming it, either as simply an opaque identifier or as a dereferenceable object. And those are different characteristics of the identifier that you get from different pieces of the URL structure. So let's be careful here not to just assume that our friendly neighborhood DNS will do this for us, because the whole DNS op working group will immediately say, hi, you've just bought a camel. Are you sure you wanted a camel? Because that's maybe not what you actually want. So let's keep talking.
Okay, we've got Jonathan, Ali, Rajiv, James. Jonathan.
Yeah. So, I mean, my question is this, from the discussion before, I had the impression this is more sort of just a name, not name in the URN sense, because that has its own overloaders, but just something that you use inside the protocol, not actually, this isn't actually a URL in the sense of you get handed one of these things and that tells you, the actual host name and IP address to connect to and, send it your initial subscribe or whatever the first message is. Is this actually a URL, or is this some sort of naming that is unique inside a session you create over some other mechanism?
Who wants to answer that?
Yeah. It can be both, or they can be separate. I think it's quite convenient if they're both. I like the notion that the URL that describes the broadcast in its uniqueness is also the URL that is carried inside the objects to identify them. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. We could decouple the two, but then I'd want, what's the reason for decoupling them?
Who we have next? Ali?
Thank you. So we had a similar problem with RTCP C names. And back in the day in RFC 3550, the C names assumed to be, they were assumed to be globally unique, but then it turned out that they were not really. So we revised that part of the RFC, and then for those who are interested, and I mean, they can look at 7022 RFC number. That's the RFC number that provides globally unique CNAME numbers, which is pretty much more or less the same thing what we want to achieve here. So.
Thanks. Then James. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I skip you, Rajiv? My fault.
Okay, that's fine. James can finish. Mine is a follow-up more on what Will was saying, but.
Okay, I was going to come back to what Ted was talking about DNS and such. And I think that by virtue of using Quick and thus TLS, we automatically buy into a certain set of restrictions on how we use DNS, how we do host names, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that some of the more peer-to-peer-like use cases are very nice problems to solve, but we're going to be very, very limited and/or going to have to break some of the TLS defaults in behaviors and implementations and stuff, and that will become very unpalatable. And I think that the answer to this is how we structure the relationship with relays and other such intermediates in our architecture. That will have to be the answer, at least in the short term.
Yeah, so my point was also, in fact, very similar. The whole case of peer-to-peer stuff is the only case really where using a DNS-backed URI scheme kind of starts running into challenges. Because in pretty much every other use case, you are going to have some entity with a valid DNS name usually available to act as an anchor for building out a potentially globally addressable URI. Okay, which would in most real-time communication cases, it would be whichever platform, the Zooms or the Google Meets of the world, who are providing that infrastructure on which the first round of relaying happens, and that's where really all of these identifiers are getting assigned. The peer-to-peer use case definitely is something where we need to think about this, but even there, it's not like there haven't been other peer-to-peer systems like SIP, which also did try and do stuff around getting identifiers and stuff that allows completely decentralized communication. So is there something that we can pull from standards like that which might inform us here?
Okay, I say Suhas and then Mo, and then maybe we should, I don't know, if you have something else, jump in the queue now.
Yep, couple of points. Like the relay discovery is kind of out of scope. The name discovery, we should think carefully on where should the name discovery come. Should the base protocol even talk about how the names are discovered other than name to have certain properties? That's one thing. And also whatever name we use has an implication on how things are stored in the relay. And a relay does not understand a connection level semantics. It understands like multiple domains coming in across multiple connections, which might also reconnect and come back. The relays need not, when you think about how we can build the performant relays that need not have to always sticky to a connection. The names being globally unique will, or we will, in whatever context we say it's unique, will help build the relays independent of an application domain, but still be able to make their choices in serving the requests. So we need to keep relays in mind when we come up with the names as well.
Okay, Mo?
Yeah, I agree with Suhas that it may not be in the base protocol to really care about the structure of these things. I would try to avoid calling things URIs or names or anything. We're just talking about identifiers. So let's just call them identifiers. I'm still not really clear on whether or not we need a broadcast identifier at all, because that's sort of, encroaching on the manifest space. And I don't think it's clear yet in the working group whether or not we want the manifest to be part of the core protocol. or whether you want to be something adjunct like it is in Dash and HLS and those other media streaming standards. So I think if we just agree that there needs to be an identifier for the things that the protocol cares about, and so far the only things that the protocol cares about are tracks and the objects inside of those tracks. So should we just have identifiers that can map the track? I'm not sure if we need an identifier to map the broadcast or manifest level things, because they might not live in the base protocol. They may be a higher level thing, or just a library that de facto gets de facto use, not necessarily part of the core protocol.
Just as I handed off to Roberto, I think my thought is that the reason why you have names probably is mostly for caching, right? You want to be able to requesting and then caching. I don't know what it's called. Go ahead. Oh, no mic. Oh, here it comes. 2, 1 for each hand.
There you go. And also authorization and security and prevention of dissemination of materials that we should not legally or otherwise be disseminating. There are a whole host of things with regards to authentication that require IDs. Every participant in the system that may be replicating data needs to understand at least whether it should be doing it.
Okay, Lucas.
Hi, I think I'm probably just being slow. Maybe it's late and I can't concentrate and follow the discussion. But what I'm still struggling to understand with Warp is how the heck do you find the thing you're just trying to connect to and connect to it using web transport over HTTP3? So you're going to have to create a quick connection and send an SNI, maybe an encrypted SNI, and form up everything that needs to align with HTTP's authority model, and possibly same origin model, because you've got to think about the web platform, and do all of those things just to enable like a web transport session, because that connect request has a path in it, and we need to figure out what to put in that path so that the thing that's handling the request knows what it's allowing or disallowing. So maybe this is like not about broadcast URIs, but identifiers of other stuff. I don't know, but so far none of the discussion is really helping clarify to me, like how do you even initiate this thing? I think Martin Duke posted, Martin Duke did post to the list earlier, and I think that discussion is kind of a good illustration of how it might work, but not how it should work or whatever. I think kind of proceeding there will help maybe clarify this. Maybe we want to reflect some of that discussion into this ticket. I don't know. I'm happy to be part of the discussion, but or for someone to tell me I'm completely missing the point here.
Thanks, Lucas. I was thinking the same thing, that you needed, if you're going to make a web transport, you connect to a resource. There's already a URL involved from the beginning here, and my computer is locked. And Ted claims that I should be able to put him in here. There you are. You're just not called Ted. See, names are important. Ted is not globally unique. He is globally unique.
So there's a Microsoft guy called Ted Hardy that's based here somewhere in Seattle.
I've not met him, but I've met you, and I think you're unique. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we did. Yes. What do you think? 15 or 20? Let's try for 15. Let's try for 12 and a half, and then it'll be 15. Get up, stretch, walk. It's your last chance. Okay, start moseying back to your seats, or stand up and run away from your seats, as the case may be. Oh, Jordy is our scribe. And we lost our backup scribe. While we're waiting for our primary scribe to return, can somebody help? He's been doing a great job, I think, for a first-time scribe, but for sure could use a backup. Come on, people. It's not that hard. Oh, did I steal your mic again? Yes. Sorry.
So while we're waiting for a scribe, the chairs have a request to you. If we're going to plan a short interim meeting between now and Yokohama, it would be very, very useful if you could send us any long tail blockers, right? So we knew before doing this one, for example, that there was a couple of related conferences or meetings happening that we were trying to avoid when we were setting up the doodle. So if you know of any of those between 2 weeks from now and 2 weeks before Yokohama, that is basically between, let's call it Valentine's Day and the 12th of March, send us those that are blockers, and we'll use those to help map out what the doodle poll will say. Could you send it to us? That sounded very useful that there was a 23rd interim, but if you send it to us in email, all of those auxiliary brains will have it.
It dramatically increases, but does not guarantee.
Yeah, MOQ chairs. I couldn't hear you. Well, walk
Time zone.
So we haven't picked a time zone yet, and we have advice from the ISG that we must be equally mean across time to various people. That's a different way of putting their fairness principle. So we will probably pick the next time zone not to be this time zone, but to be some other time zone. Maybe China. Who knows?
He said, I think he said it depends who, well, but it runs both ways. People who will participate if it's convenient for them.
Yep. Okay.
I actually wrote a whole draft about how to be equally painful on time. It doesn't matter. Okay. I actually wrote a whole draft of how to be equally mean in time zones, so you could go use that.
Okay. Now that we have our scribe back, we can go back to...
All right. Are you ready to scribe some more? Okay, you're doing a great job, and I'm. Oh, what's that? No, go ahead. Get your coffee. All right. If I don't get a backup, I'm going to spin around in my arm, and whoever's landing where my arm points is going to be the backup. Come on. Who wants to help?
Really, you're going to make him? You're going to make him play spin the bottle? That just seems very strange and cruel.
Is there somebody remote who can back up? Maybe. You think you're avoiding our gaze by keeping your camera off, but all right. Jordy, can you soldier on for 2 issues without a backup? Okay, Martin. Thank you. Thank you, Martin. Okay, so 2 issues left here. I think depending on how long it takes us, we may also just quickly scan the list and see if there's anything else that somebody wants to bring up. What's our stop time when we're going to start doing something else? We put on the agenda, we were going to spend half an hour starting at 4:15 to do if we need any small design teams. Okay. All right, we'll run until 4:20-ish, plus or minus. Okay, here we go. Definition of messages in section makes too many assumptions. This is Christian's issue. There's a mic. There you go.
good thing sitting by Suas because the mic is there often. Nothing about me, of course. Yeah, I mean, I read that issue when I was doing a review of the warp draft, and we discussed a lot of that yesterday and before as well. And I think the fundamental issue is that the draft mixes the definition of message format and the data model, because I believe that the definition of the message format belongs into the transport. I mean, the message are characteristic of one mapping. If I do a rush mapping, I probably will not have exactly the same messages as if I do a warp mapping or a datagram mapping. And so that was the first thing. Otherwise, there are issues there like reusing the URI in each of the object definition and things like that, which are things. So my first question was, hey, maybe we want to split. And the second one, I mean, to keep it short, the second one is that we should pay attention to termination condition. As in, the message should be, the stream of message should be such that the receiver can determine what is missing. Either what is missing when we are sending objects, I mean, and some are dropped on the floor for some reason, or what is missing when we are closing the connection, and what should have been received, and when do you know that you have received everything. The reason for when you want to have received everything is largely about testing, because for testing it does make a difference whether you are passing 98% of the data or 100%, and you can only test that if you have termination condition, etc. But it also makes sense for the user experience.
Okay, we've got Luke and Jonathan.
I think I'll try to summarize, or at least a little bit, but right now the warp draft is very hands-off in how streams is supposed to be used. It's just like, send these messages. I don't care how they get sent. We really should define stuff like control streams, and to Christian's point, like a broadcast can own a bidirectional stream or something, and if that's closed, the broadcast is now over. There's just currently, we really need to define a relationship of how streams work in the data model.
Okay, Jonathan, and then Suas.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was going to dig in a little bit to what Christian said about knowing what's missing. I mean, there's a difference between knowing that something is missing, there was something here I didn't get it, versus having some notion of what that something was and if it was important or not. Like, particularly if you're talking about prioritization, is the thing that was missing a priority 0 thing, so I better, work really hard to, get that back and not move forward till I get it, or was it a priority 3 thing and I don't care? So I think that's, I think sort of, which is, knowing things about the things you didn't get implies a lot of things about what's in the things you do get, and how much information they carry. So that's something that needs to be, I think, thought about.
I think Suhas.
I think I agree with Christian, and I would like to expand on 2 to say it needs to expose something in the API as well. We might not define in this group the API, but it's, without that, you can't do 2 here.
So I have a clarification question about how many messages are there in the warp draft that could be, I guess, partially reliable? Is it only object messages? Or are there other messages that are relying on the fact that a stream has a certain semantic to it? Because like broadcast, for example, I don't think you would be like, I got private. Yeah, that's my question. You are in the queue?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, the intent with object messages is, yeah, they can be cut off halfway and you just don't get the rest of them, kind of like streams. everything else is intended to be received fully.
Okay, Christian?
Yeah, I think that we should separate, on one hand, the data model that specifies the properties of the object and things like that, and the actual format of the messages. And I'd like to have that separated, because the actual format of the messages, we cannot assume that different transports will all use the same message format. What we have to assume is that different transport, if we define, say, one message per stream, many message per stream, datagrams, whatever, they will have to express what is in the data model, but they may well express that in their own way. For example, if we want to have the message with a group ID attached, if we send them the message one by one, we want the group ID in every message. If we send them as a stream for a group of block, then that group ID is constant and you only need it at the very beginning. Same goes for the media IDs, same goes for all kinds of stuff like that. So we want to assume that the message format for the specific transport derives directly from the data model. It has to express it as well, but...
So just as a clarifying question, when you use transport in that statement, you mean
mapping.
The mapping on top of Quick,
yeah.
Not a transport like Quick had to fail over,
yeah.
The whole thing had to fail over to a TCP-based transport, right?
Yes, yes.
And maybe we should add an issue for this. Is there anybody in the group who believes that we actually have a failover strategy if Quick is not available? Oh, Rajiv does. Okay, Martin does.
I think it's important to have,
okay.
at least as, it may be a part of our standard that we mark as transitional, because
nothing lasts longer than a transitional effort.
No.
Okay, so
wait a minute.
But the idea behind it is basically to say there is a possibility that there may be, at least in the initial few years, a client that's able to successfully set up a quick connection, and something changes on the network, and now his traffic is being rerouted through a path that is not UDP clean or is somehow unsuitable to Quick. And he has to move away from Quick to something TCP based.
So I apologize, because I raised what turns out to be a very big issue in the middle of somebody else's conversation. I will take the action to file an issue here about failover so that we can have that conversation on it. And we can go back to the...
Can I just
go ahead, Mark.
Justify my comment? Yeah, so I mean, to the extent that we are going to do this on web transport, which maybe is not written in stone yet, like that quite naturally falls back to HTTP2 if need be. So if the path is blocking UDP and or Quick, we are good to go with that very little in the way of additional software engineering.
So I agree that that's not written in stone yet.
Yeah.
So what do we want to do? One thing that could be done is that there are several bullet points here. Is to open a separate PR for each of them. I don't know if I want to write 5 PRs.
One second. Suhas, you were in the queue, but did you get a chance to express what you wanted to say?
I kind of want to say something. The current assumption that an object can be a GOP kind of lets you to believe that a partial object is okay. Because in that case, the assumption here is that since an object is a GOP, you can drop something at the tail end. But that assumption would not hold if an object is individual frame or a slice. I think we need to separate a data model that defines how things are related and how things are mapped is two different things. If we join both the things, it always confuses the data model. One way is the way we send it on a transport to. We need to separate both together.
Can you pull the queue up real quick, Ted, so I can just, sorry, my computer is, see if there's anybody else. Luke wanted to respond, go ahead.
So I will say that you're totally allowed to drop the end of a frame. I mean, it's not a whole lot of data, but there's no reason why you're not allowed to do that. I think the bigger thing here, though, is I want to make sure that before we explicitly add multiple modes and have, like, in the protocol using mode A or mode B or mode C, to figure out if we actually need to delimit them. The warp draft is intentionally vague right now because a relay just forwards objects, uses small instructions. And the decoder has all the information it needs to tell if it's a, you know, GOP-based delivery or frame-based delivery and render it. So I don't think that there's necessarily a need for 2 separate modes or 3 separate modes like QuickR has. And would at least try to say, let's try to get one first.
Okay, Jonathan.
Yeah, I think the question is, when you're dropping things, you know, at least ideally, if you have to drop things, you'd like everything you do send to be something that's useful. And obviously, if you're only sending part of a frame, the rest of the frame, unless, you know, you got a very clever encoder, is not useful. If you're dropping the tail of a GOP, most likely you're sending somewhere at that tail you have half a frame, unless you got very lucky, and that half a frame is not useful. So, I mean, obviously the ability to know, to say, I'm only going to send things that are useful, has implications on complexity. So it's certainly easier to just say, I give up partway through, and if you get something that's useless, well, you throw it away. But if we can do something where a relay can say, when things are bad, I'm going to make sure that you only send things that are useful because I don't have enough bandwidth anyway, I don't want to be wasting it. And that's not too complex. We would like to be able to do that, but obviously there's a complexity trade-off. So, but I think that's something that should be at least, would be good to have when doing whatever that design is.
Go ahead, Christian.
To follow what Jonathan is saying, one thing we do today, because we want to test, etc., is when we drop a frame, we send some kind of a tombstone for the frame in the stream instead of the frame. So basically, we send, hey, object 10, this is now his tombstone of length 0 that tells you I've dropped it. We could go one step further, if I hear what Jonathan is saying, is also send the metadata of the frame we have dropped. As in, I dropped that frame and it had this kind of metadata attached to it, which then allows the receivers to do the kind of thing that Jonathan was describing. And to Luke's point, in the definition of the protocol, I'd very much like to say that the objects are atomic.
Okay, that last part is maybe something we should spend a little bit of time talking about separately, because I'm not sure that everybody agrees that an object is atomic. There was something I wanted to bring up there related to the other.
Because look, if only because they might be encrypted. If they have encrypted and you drop a single byte, you lose all of it. So
I think what just to kind of summarize what was probably the original point that you made on the issue is that, and at some point we called it the object model and the messages are blended, and the properties of the messages / objects defined in the protocol or defined in the draft are borrowing some of their assumptions about how they're going to be transported. And it might be, at least now where we're still experimenting with multiple different ways of sending things, to express instead the requirements. And so first of all, deciding are objects atomic, I think, is part of that. But then also, you know, this message needs to be delivered in its entirety to be useful, or this message does not need to be delivered in its entirety to be useful. And expressing that, and then at least planning for, and when you map this onto streams, it looks like this. And we rely on the property of a stream to guarantee this property. And if we were mapping it onto something else, it will provide that property in a different way. Is that, am I re-expressing what you said? Okay. How do people feel about that? I heard Luke say, I'd rather we just have one way to do it and not mess with having more than one way to do it. You're off.
I understand why Luke wants to end up with just one way, and I'd be fine with ending up with just one way, but we are not ending.
Yeah, I don't know. Luke, do you want to respond at all, or?
I mean, at least the point of this warp draft was meant to be the compromise, and that here's frame-based delivery, GOP-based delivery. We can use the same messages, the same structure. the idea that objects are, I wouldn't say atomic, but at least they should be delivered in order. Like there's no gaps. No gaps in an object is like one of the distinctions. Yeah, I just don't want a fork. I don't want a fork in the protocol where we have, oh, this is media over quick with frames, this is media over quick with GOPS, and this is media over quick with datagrams. Like, we need to probably figure out why we want to and if we can converge.
I think that's the reason why having a data model that says how things are grouped and how do you map it to transport is left to the application. Yeah, today we're doing streams where each stream maps to a group. Tomorrow we might do something different, but we don't have to specify everything as Luke said. We need to just specify these are the way things are grouped and how you want to transmit is what defines one, like the base protocol draft defines one way. By the time it becomes an RFC, that's totally fine.
Let's see. Luke and Suhas have gone, but then Roberto, you're next.
Well, that was fast. So if we wish to be agnostic in the way you're suggesting, I think we have to be mindful of the transactional overheads of having lots of small objects on protocols that make that expensive.
Thank you. I don't know. I'm very curious. I mean, I think everyone agrees at some point we're going to have to send some media bits on a wire or over the air or transmit, right? And I think what is the smallest unit that, for example, can't have a hole in it, or the smallest unit that can be dropped is, I think, an important thing to understand. I don't know. Maybe I'm not. Maybe that's not something we need to understand or not. But I don't know. Puzzle on that. And then Roberto, you're back, or you didn't leave.
Sorry, I was just going to say that's a bit, but
okay, there we go. That's where we're starting from, people. Okay, Mo is next.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Alan, and I think that really goes back to what Christian was calling atoms. In my mind, there are several reasons for the atom. It's not just an application level, nicety of these things are useful to me, these things are not. But also what he mentioned, the encryption context. If we're assuming end-to-end encryption, we have to have an off tag at the end of each one of these atoms. And if you want these atoms to be useful in any way, they have to each have their own off tag. So sorry, Roberto, but you're going to have that inefficiency of many little things. If you want to dice up your stuff in small ways, you're going to have an off tag for each one of those small things. So we need to decide what that atom is. Is it something that, we have different sizes of atoms for different applications? Some things all the way down to a slice, some things all the way up to a segment. Or do we think that we can find a common ground like Luke wanted to do and get a sort of one size fits almost all model where these atoms should work for almost all applications? I think that needs some careful thought, and it impacts both the security model, because you need to have the off tag somewhere for this, and it also impacts the application resilience model of whether or not an application can effectively recover when it loses one of these atoms.
Okay, thanks. We have Suhas, Luke, and Jonathan.
I think Alan's point is right. We need to basically, the way I was thinking about is that, like, not to confuse with new terminology called atoms, but whatever it is, that should carry the information that goes along with it that says, can it be dropped or not? And how and who sets it, only the application knows. An application that wants to use slice as an atom would set it differently compared to an application that wants to use a GOP as an atom. So I think we need to basically, instead of making one term that basically has different compositions, it'll always confuse. And we need to kind of break that down a bit to define.
Since I know groups are a concept that you've introduced, is your thought that a group is such a thing, or were you envisioning that there could be holes in a group?
Object is the atom in that case. Object is the atom. So if
object is atom.
Yeah. So that defines it. Can it be forwarded or dropped or whatever or delivery order? what do we do with it? And groups are just saying, how the application divided them.
And also clarifying, in your mind then, an object, it can be bigger than a single datagram or not?
Yes.
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 Okay. So you can have an atom which is many, many packets.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, the intention is object is atom. In Warp, it's entire GOP, so it's like 1,000 packets. Well, at least for the GOP-based delivery, they can be huge.
No.
Well, it depends on. So first off, it depends on the encoding what's droppable. In the case in my case, I'm using a lot of reference frames. Nothing's droppable in the middle. You cannot have a gap. So explicitly saying that a GOP is my atom. But if you have non-reference frames, you can have smaller.
Look, excuse me.
Whoa, we're breaking down here. I had Suhas who went, and then Luke. Did you have anything where you wanted to add on that, Luke?
I'm going to argue with Luke, so he might want to respond to me. I'm saying, if you're assuming your GOPs are not atoms, and the reason I say that is because you can drop the tails. If you can drop the tail and still have something useful, it's not an atom because you can break it up. Okay. So therefore, if you want that model, and I think it's maybe a useful model, you need to have some way of,
the same is true for frames. You can have some of the slices may have arrived, but I get the
generally speaking, most of the cases, in non-weird cases, part of a frame is not useful. It is not, there are probably weird cases where they would be, in which case you'd structure them probably as the slices are the atoms, and that's fine. But generally speaking, you can't, if you drop the first half of a frame and try to render it, you're going to get users complaining that they have terrible video on their screen, and they'll be right. So don't do that. I think that the something where you can tail drop is fundamentally different than something where you can't usefully tail drop. Obviously you can drop the tail and then the person has to throw the whole thing away, but that's true of anything, obviously. But where you can, yes, as a relay, I can expect that somebody can get something useful out of the first half of this is a very different case than as a relay, I can't expect that.
Just quick response. Would you buffer the entire frame and make sure it arrives at a relay before sending it to ensure that it is an atom and it gets fully sent?
No, but
you'd stream it and run the risk of dropping
I'd run the risk,
it.
but if I make the decision of I need to drop this for bandwidth reasons, then I'm going to say, I'm probably going to make sure that I drop the whole thing and possibly even, try to only do that for things I haven't forwarded any of yet. Packet loss is one thing, but deliberate scaling things out for bandwidth reasons is different.
Okay, there's one more issue after this one, so I wanted to, we locked the queue just to save about at least 10 minutes. So we have Roberto, Christian, and Suhas left in the queue.
In non-joking, like atoms a lot. I think that we need to be careful about what exact semantics we assign them. Otherwise, as indicated in the prior conversation, there may be confusion. We certainly have bits and bobs that if one bit is missing will not work, especially when encryption can be involved. So making sure that we come up with the terms or term for what this is great, and then so long as the producer or publisher produces it, I think we're awesome.
Thanks, Christian, and then Suhas is going to get the
It
final
was just, that in the implementation of Warp that I presented Monday, we did not assume that the GOP was a single object.
It's okay. It was on Tuesday, not Monday.
Oh, that same? Yeah. So you can implement something like Warp with the same mapping of objects to streams and have all the objects in a GOP following each other until you close the stream. That doesn't change much. That's what we did.
I don't know how to respond to that. Yeah, I I think we should probably step back and figure out. Like, I even don't even remember what this issue is about, honestly.
Me neither. Yeah. I think it was about how we map messages onto. Do the messages and the object model have too many assumptions about how they're going to be transported, baked in, and should we write the draft in a way that's a little bit more separating of those things? Like, this sequence of bits is relatively atomic, or can only be tail dropped, or cannot have any holes, or whatever the semantics of it are, how big that is, and then separating that from, we'll put it on a stream, or we'll put it in a sequence of datagrams and reconstruct it if it needs to be there and there's a hole in it, we'll fix it. I think that's what this issue is about, but I think the discussion has also been useful. So Suhas, a short final word, and then we're going to assign someone to solve all this.
Thank you for bringing this up, Alan. Yes, I agree to your point that if there's a separation, then mapping it to one streams or multiple streams, or eventually if you want to do datagrams, can be flexible. And that way you're not binding like baking in the solution of how you should do that one. And also in the case of GOP, like as Christian was saying, that the idea with a warp is that each GOP belongs to its own stream, and that's totally fine. And the data model allows today, the proposed data model that allows for that as well. And in that case, if every object in the GOP is important, should not be dropped, then that has to be marked with high priority. That's the only way. You can have something inside GOP, and you say, I don't want to drop anything. The only option is that you can hint and say, everything is of high priority to me, and network does whatever it does.
Network's going to do what network's going to do. Just because you say don't drop this doesn't mean it doesn't need to be retransmitted sometimes. Okay, so who wants to be assigned to this issue? Christian, you suggested you would write some PRs, but you didn't want to write 5, so we maybe needed...
I was lazy. I should have done a separate set of issues. I did 5 bullets instead. But
does anybody... how about just for now, for the purpose of this meeting, we can assign to you and maybe a few other folks, and then if you break it up into separate issues,
yes,
you can also help with the reassignment.
Yep.
Who else wants to help on this issue? I see Suhas with his hand. Where was that hand when I was looking for scribes, Suhas?
I'll help you in your comment.
All right. Anyone else? Okay, we'll let you guys run with that for now. And I think so Christian, you are in here somewhere?
Yes, absolutely. Ritema, that's my surname underneath.
There you are. I'm not sure why you weren't showing up before. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, okay. Kirill, broadcast URI and object message.
I think we did talk about this yesterday, and there was some discussion about that we may be able to use QPAC to kind of save on this. So, but the general concern is it's maybe premature optimization, but it's definitely going to be a problem, is that URIs can be long, and having it in objects like audio for audio streams is going to be a huge overhead.
Yeah, if people don't know that I'm the editor of QPAC, I love QPAC. I don't want more QPAC right now. Anyway, anybody else want to say anything? Christian?
I think we have consensus that we need to somehow get that size smaller. And basically, you want to have some kind of index in the object, in the message that you repeat a lot, and you want to negotiate the mapping of that index to the URI in the setup, and we can leave it at that.
Okay, Will.
So I agree. There's consensus. We need the URI related to the object, and we can look at compression techniques for in the hops to reduce bandwidth. I want to raise the issue that if it's tied to the the quick session connector, and the client drops, or a whole series of client drops, a Relay is going to have to rewrite its database, its table, if it's tying the session to the broadcast URI. And that's a lot of churn, a lot of work as connections get dropped, because a lot of them could get dropped at the same time quickly. So we must just be careful of that as we propose schemes. We must look at the impact on the relay, both in terms of compute and memory, and the implications. Because we do need the broadcast URI to create the cache key so we can uniquely describe every object.
Okay. Let me ask this, which is, do we need to solve, it sounds like there's like compression, there's lots of different ways to compress stuff, as long as would we be okay adopting the draft if it just had the URI on every object, and we could solve this as a working group after adoption? Do we feel like it has to be solved before adoption? Rajiv says wait.
I probably, on the other side, I think as long as we define what the URI scope is, I think that could be a good base to start adopting. And then with implementation, I'm sure we'll come back and say this would not work, and we need to work on that one at some point if it does not work.
So I'm stepping away from that chair table for a second to give a personal opinion, and that is, I think this is an optimization. And we have a bunch of other things that we need this URI to have as characteristics. And I think folding this optimization into that discussion is probably the right way to go, rather than having it as an independent discussion.
Should we change this from architectural to performance?
Yeah, I think this is a performance issue.
Does that mean we can, so we do feel comfortable then punting it potentially past adoption?
Well, we have an architectural issue around the broadcast URI as an identifier already. So we can consider the performance in the context of that, but I don't think that it needs to be a separable potential blocker at this point.
Okay.
But again, note that I am not sitting at the chair
No
table.
one is sitting at the chair table right now, Ted.
Somebody could leap up and suddenly become chair. Anyway, that was my
The
personal
group
opinion.
suddenly headless.
Yeah. Let me be more concrete. Should I assign someone to this issue, or are we? Oh, I'm sorry, Jonathan.
I hope that wasn't an answer to that question, because definitely not.
Jonathan wants to be assigned to this issue,
Absolutely
and we'll
not.
see you in our interim.
No. No. So what I was going to say is, I mean, I guess taking a step back, I'm wondering. I thought there was some discussion earlier that basically what you subscribe to is tracks, and broadcasts are in some sense a function of the catalog, and the relay doesn't even know about them. At which point you wouldn't put this there. So maybe this isn't there because all you have is a track ID, and that's enough. And you know because you assigned the track IDs, which track ID goes with this broadcast, but all the object has to have is the track ID.
So to restate what you're saying is that maybe the object does not. Maybe you can just have the track ID. Track IDs are only, they are not, I can't remember if they're part of the identifier. Like,
maybe there's a scope issue, or maybe there. I mean, depending on how they're assigned, which is a little tricky, obviously, but maybe.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, you can solve everything with compression. You can also solve everything with indirection. So.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
I saw Will jump in the queue also.
Yeah, I jumped to answer the question there. But what if one publisher uses track ID ABC and another one uses track ID ABC? Then we have a collision at the relay. So the broadcast URI, the tuple between broadcast URI and track ID, group ID and object ID, that uniquely defines the object, and we need the broadcast URI.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe maybe I was thinking of a different model, but I was thinking maybe like in the subscribe you say send me broadcast ID, 50 byte string, track ID 50 byte string with identifier 1, and then it sends you 1, and it's your responsibility as a subscriber to make sure the labels you give it are unique. And then
so your subscribe request dictates the wire the alias that will be used when it comes back. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
It doesn't change what the publisher puts out.
No.
But it changes the wire delivery
I
format.
think it sort of makes it hop by hop. I see Lucas.
It is hop by hop.
Who then becomes responsible for that mapping?
It's the driver.
Okay. Lucas, go ahead.
Like we're smart. There's lots of existing work. There's lots of new work we could create. Like I have confidence we can solve that problem. But what would just help at this stage is to more clearly articulate what the performance objective would be. Saving stuff just for the sake of it is brilliant. But I don't want to kind of waste time deciding the color of the bike shed for what we should do now. Let's just say like. There's a problem here, that there's overhead that we don't like, we don't want. Which actor in the system is paying for that overhead? Like if I think about HTTP, URLs can be incredibly long, but they're not transmitted in line with the resources themselves from a response perspective, for instance. So who's feeling the pain depends. With QPack, yeah, we designed for a certain target of what we're trying to optimize for around both saving space, but not just for the sake of saving space, but to optimize for reducing latency of how quickly a request could get from one space to the other. So is the performance objective here about space saving or low latency? I think if we can help like rephrase this into something we would like to achieve, then people can go off and come up with different designs, and we can weigh up against the complexity or the benefits or whatever with some sample, actual sample data so that we can have a bake-off effectively.
Thanks, Lucas. Okay, I locked the queue since we're coming up on what we said 4:20, which was going to be our stop for issue discussion. That I have Roberto, and then once again, Suhas is going to take us home.
Roberto Peon. And I think there's actually two issues that we're trying to address with this, or we're concerned about. One is obviously how do you address this thing in a way that doesn't cause an explosion of bytes. And the other one that I hear Will bringing up is how do we do this in a way that's consistent such that we don't have to be having lots of mappings stored in the relays and wasting space in CPU. So I think those are the two things, if we're not explicitly keeping track of them somewhere else, now they've been mentioned.
Feel free to just type them in the issue if you want. And Suhas.
I think I did it wrongly.
Oh. You don't want to say anything? Okay. Right at the end there, I sort of reminded that we had sort of hoped that maybe today we would get to talk a little bit about session reestablishment and reliability, but it seems like that discussion is probably going to happen later. It's an important discussion. It's just we had to talk about other things. I personally feel like this talk through the issues gives me more optimism that we can evolve the draft we have into something that people are amenable to adoption. But if anybody doesn't think so or wants to just like, I don't know, if it wants to add any other comments or feel free now. Of course, I locked the queue, so solved that problem. Glad you agree. Okay. Okay, I'm going to sit down. I've been standing for a while. Ted's going to make some design teams. Make some design teams.
So when we were talking earlier today, there were a couple of issues that seemed to be chewy issues where somebody going off and writing down a common set of proposals for either the taxonomies, the vocabulary, or the topologies that we're talking about would be useful. And in particular, it would be useful to have that before the next interim. So what we were hoping for, and I know to some degree the James and Spencer are already working on the terminology side, but we were hoping to add a couple of people to help them draft that text, to kind of go off and say, hey, I know how this works in CAMF, or I know how this works in some other system, and I want to write down the way we're going to talk about it so that it helps map into things that already exist. Because I think that would be a useful addition to the kinds of text we need here. So I was hoping to ask first for people to do that, to join Spencer and James in the kind of like build up the terminology section so we can talk about things without the running constantly into the, do you mean track the way these people do or those people do, right? So volunteers, please. Luke?
So I started on a terminology draft and closed the PR, mostly because it was really short, but it was exactly what you're saying, in just exploring the different terminology and different standards and specs.
Okay, so Ali and Luke can help with Spencer and James. Sorry, it's about 8 hours later in my head than you here, because in Portugal it's 8 hours later, and I'm not really all the way here yet. And since I'm leaving tomorrow, I'm not going to try and get any more on here. So if the two of you can Suhas, did you? Okay. We don't want to make these too large, and there's going to be more than one of these. Okay. The next one. No, he put his hand down. He's waiting to see if there are better design teams he can join. You never join the first design team, right? Because, you know, the Carol Merrill is going to come out with a box and open it, and there's going to be a car inside. Or maybe a goat, depending on how your luck is running. The next one we wanted to talk about is intermediaries. There was a good bit of discussion earlier today about the different types of intermediaries and what actions we believe they can take. That needs some elaboration, and we're hoping to get a couple of people to go off and take the notes from today and their own thinking and elaborate that, so that when we come together and say, hey, there's a network element in the path and it does this, we can describe that cleanly. And this is particularly for the on-path network elements, not the decoder or encoder side of the things, but the things which aren't, the things which are encoding or the things which are decoding. We had thoughts on who we might point to here, but first let's ask for volunteers. Okay, Will? Suhas?
We have,
Okay, so Rajiv and Varun. I think that's plenty.
Oh, we have Hangshi in.
Hangshi, do you want to join as well?
No, he's in the queue.
Yes, I want to join.
Okay, that's quite a big group, but let's stop there. So we've got, for the notes, Hangshi, Varun, Rajiv, Will, and Suhas. Yes, all-star team. Well done.
Spencer.
Sorry, is that going through the list of definitions that from the talk this afternoon, among other things?
Among other things, yeah.
Definitions for the things that are in the middle.
Right. So it's elaborating on that to try and describe the intermediary behaviors.
Okay. If that turns out to be a somewhat high-level description of the behaviors, I'd like to be doing that, and I would suggest doing that in the requirements draft. I've actually got a PR started there that I'm working on, but.
So just like the first one, both of these pieces of text, once they've come up with them, may turn into things that go into the requirements draft, right? So
right.
It's much better to have those sort of set outside of the actual protocol definition until you decide that this particular intermediary is something that the protocol has to have machinery to support, and then you describe it in the protocol draft. But in the meantime, these are more kind of use case focused, so we were expecting those to be eventually text that gets folded into your and James's draft. But
okay, I guess I'm kind of asking where the forum for the people to work on that is. Normally it would be in a GitHub repo, right?
so we hadn't actually wanted to kind of pin people down to that yet, because we wanted them to kind of go off and self-organize. But if they wanted to use the GitHub repo for the requirements draft for that, that would be a fine place for them to self-organize into. But I think we're just trying to get the volunteers first, give them the deadline, which is the upcoming, as yet unscheduled interim before Yokohama, and then go from there. Make sense?
Yeah, sure. I guess all I was saying was that it might be good for me to be on that team as well if there's not 35 people on it already.
There's 5. That's a pretty big number. But if you need to be on it as well, we can add you. So we'll make it 6.
Thank you.
Okay. What was the third one? You did? I think so.
I don't have it written down. Object model, relays. What thorny issue are we forgetting that we spent all this meeting talking about but not coming anywhere?
I think the object model, because that defines what we have to do, or the design team that's working on the relays. That's an important aspect of it. We can't do it in vacuum.
Okay, I mean, I think to some degree, I think what Ted is calling terminology overlaps, or is overlapping some with object model. Am I wrong, or?
So I think that the terminology draft does overlap it in that you need the terminology in order to create the object model, right? Because you have the terminology of what each bit is, and then the object model tells you how they relate to each other, right?
Right.
And so this stack of bits we call an object. The decodable bit we call a gloop, and the relationship is every gloop must have the sacks of objects that it requires to be decodable, right? So it gets built up into that.
We have Javier.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, would it be possible to make it 7 for the team? I mean, I would be interested to participate as well, if there is any chance, any possibility at all.
So you would like to be?
This was for relays, I think.
For the.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I was maybe I'm a bit late about that, but I was in a queue for.
Sorry, didn't see you.
Sorry about that. No, that's me. Yeah, I was a bit late also.
Okay. I apologize, but I think we probably are already pretty large on the design team, but obviously it's going to come back to the working group as a whole. So please contribute there.
Thank you.
Will is also in queue.
Yeah, just to comment that I think the object model is key to the protocol and to relay support. That should be the highest priority from a design perspective. And what we name intermediaries and how we classify them and the semantics of their operation, to me, is less important than establishing the object model.
So I agree that the object model is a critical thing, and what we're hoping is by getting the vocabulary into a reasonable state before we get to Yokohama, that we have a common way of talking about it in Yokohama and can settle on the object model. But some of what we had problems with earlier today was that when people were talking about the object model, they were cross purposes between having different systems in mind and having different ideas of what the atoms were and having different ideas of the relationships as a result. We were kind of not making the kind of progress we need. I'd love to have both an object model and a terminology model running at the same time, but because the object model people would constantly be having to go back to the terminology people and say, what are we calling this bit again? It seems like serializing them is an unfortunate but probably necessary step. None of this, the fact that we're going off and asking people to do these as design team exercises stops any other work. And if you want to continue to talk about the object model on the mailing list or amongst yourselves, please do. What will end up happening at the end of the day, though, is we will ask you to normalize your vocabulary in that discussion to the agreed on set after we've agreed on the set.
I think that would be, the normalization would be easy to accomplish. For the object model, what would have been really useful today is a side-by-side, say on the screen, here's one classification system, here's another, and then we can debate that. So if we can set that as a work item for either the interim or for Yokohama, I think that helps the discussion.
So you know what that, the formal term for somebody who suggests things that would be useful to have for a particular meeting is?
No.
Volunteer.
Okay. I'm happy to start it.
Okay. If you're happy to start it, we'll be happy to talk about it on the list.
Okay. So I'll open up an issue, and then anyone else who wants to develop side by side. So this is not defining what the object is. It's just, I'm going to draw pictures of or list them graphically, what they are, so that we can discuss them side by side.
That sounds good. You have Q, Suhas and Q also.
Yep, I tend to agree with Will and Ted in both. There's two layers of confusion here. One is on the terminology that works across, like how do you clarify the ambiguity in terminology? That's one thing, and come up with a terminology that will work for MOQ in general. And second thing is that what are the different things that form the data model and how they interact? Because that would define things like how relays should, what the scope of things the relay should use. Like if I could propose saying that the relay team can spend the initial time to propose or an object model on the list, and if we get some agreement, we can start building on that, or we can bring the entire thing to the next interim, and we don't want to go through this same thing again.
So I'm going to again encourage you to take any measures you like, but I will also say trying to do everything everywhere all at once has not been a notorious success in this or any other working group I've been a part of. And so we probably do want to some degree, try and take bite-sized pieces of work, do them, and do the next piece. And I think we have been trying to take kind of worked examples of existing systems, like Warp or Rush or Quicker, and say, okay, what does it take to get from here to what everybody else wants? And that's a big jump. Everybody's like, well, this is missing all these ropes I need to get from here to here, and each of the issues kind of says, here's my rope. And I think if we need to kind of back up and say, okay, we're abstracting away for a second from existing systems to what the set of primitives are, and then from the set of primitives, making sure we can build each one of the systems that people need. And what we're asking for the working group to do earlier today when we went through the Jamboard session, and now, is to tackle some of these things where you're building out our understanding of the primitives. What is it these intermediaries can do? What is it that the vocabulary sets out as the lowest layer objects, and what do you build up from there? That's not the only way to go about it, but when Alan and I were talking about it earlier, we felt like if we got that done by the time we had this virtual interim, then we would have that around ourselves as useful data before going into Yokohama, when we'd have another face-to-face opportunity, two of them, since we just requested the working group sessions, and then we can dive into, okay, from these primitives, can I build the system I want? What's still missing? Does that make sense to people? Are you okay with that?
We've got Suhas, I'm not sure if you're in queue from before or if you came back in. No, Rajiv.
This is just, since you mentioned the Jamboard, it just popped up on the top of my head. Should I lock the Jamboard out so that it can't be edited anymore? Because the URL for the Jamboard is effectively in the chat archive, and anyone who comes in from there would be able to edit it. It's better if I lock it so that its state is preserved as of
go ahead.
today.
I already took a couple of PDFs of it as well.
Okay.
Okay. The next bit is kind of wrap up.
Wrap up. Okay. You guys want to see my bike shed? You don't have to paint it just one color. Rainbow is a choice. Well, I think this was I know the meeting was challenging at times, and I think maybe when we came in, we had a set of goals, and maybe we did not get all of our goals accomplished. But I feel like we did make a lot of good progress, and I think having another interim coming up to kind of resolve some of the loose ends we didn't quite get here and set us up to be continuing moving towards consensus in Yokohama is good. So I don't know that I have a ton of other final comments other than to thank everybody who came, thank my co-chair, thank the scribes especially, ADs who aren't here, everyone for participating. Meta's AV team who's done a great job. I hope that it's been good for the remote experience. It seems like it's probably way better than anything that we had pre-pandemic. Yeah, I think we may just be able to bail out of here early unless there's more people want to argue about right now. And since I put it that way, Spencer is in the queue. What do you want to argue about, Spencer?
I'm not planning on arguing. I'm asking a clarifying question. The notes right now say issues for design teams, hopefully having this solved before next IETF. Is that 116, or were you thinking more like the next interim, the unscheduled interim?
Unscheduled interim, I think, yeah. So coming out of here, we will. If you reminder, if you have hard conflicts between now and early March, send them to the chairs. Shortly, Ted and I will mark our own conflicts, sum those, propose an inconvenient time zone for everyone to meet. And the goal, I think, would be that those who signed up for those design items would do some, they're self-organized, meet, come up with some proposals, and that would be the primary agenda items for the upcoming interim, along with potentially resolutions for some of the issues that we flagged today, and other things that you propose on the list. Am I missing something?
Perfect. Thank you.
Anybody else want to say anything? Tell a joke. Show a cat video. Go get a beer. Okay. I saw at least one thumbs up. Thanks, everybody. We'll call it a wrap, and what do we say? See you on the list? See you on the list.